We'll see if we can learn from some data here today. So I'm going to step back into Virtual Optimizer. This is Virtual Optimizer Pro. As you guys can see, there's a lot of data sets that are not set up in this, and that's been very intentional. I wanted to go through this page first and show us just a highlight of what we're going to see on VO Pro. This year yet, we're still going to want to analyze data from VO Pro if we're really digging in and we're really wanting to bring some high value. We're still going to do a lot of that from VO Pro this year. As the VO Grow platform continues to improve, we'll do a lot more analytics from that as we move into next year. However, this year is a transition year, and I appreciate everybody working with us to transition from one platform to another. So that's why we're in kind of a betwixt this year. It's kind of a tough season in terms of technology. So we're going to look at some ways to ease that as we go forward, and also some ways to really begin to transition our growers into the newer technology of VO Grow. The reason behind that, friends, is that VO Grow has some very nice features in it that's going to allow large farms and full farm programs to adopt this technology a lot easier. It's quicker to maneuver through. It gives us a lot faster view of the different data sets. And as you begin to grow your farmers into more of a full farm operation, it's going to be a lot easier for them to adopt on the long haul. And the challenge is a change. We're going through a lot of change right now as we're seeing things differently. For example, these moisture trend graphs that we're seeing here on the screen, that's a different viewpoint than anything we've ever seen before. But as we learn how to really use this and we learn how to use these prediction tools, we're going to get better and better and faster and faster. That's the cool thing. We're going to get better at scaling this technology across a lot more acres. That's going to impact your businesses, make you more profitable, make your growers more profitable. So we'll be looking at those things as we move forward. But let's go ahead and dive into some data, and I'll show you some of the anomalies that we found over the last few days with excessive moisture. In this particular part of the country, some of this data is coming from south central Kansas. It sounds like the rains are going to be subsiding for a little while, hopefully, and looks like the soils are going to be drying down a little bit. But I want to show you some of the effects of this excessive moisture. So let's dive in. We'll take a look at this field first. This is one that we set up. I believe this one's actually out of Nebraska. But I wanted to show us some things to look for as we're looking at these excessive rains and wet soils and what some of this data really means. Okay, when we're looking at, again, these reference numbers on the left-hand side of the graph. Again, if you want to know what those are in more detail, contact me directly. We're not going to go into a lot of that data here, but one of the things that I look for in the soil water content on the left-hand side of this sum graph is what numbers am I sitting at with my full point to my refill point. That full point is important to me because it tells me what kind of soil I'm in. This full point sitting at about 17.4 tells me I'm in a loamy clay type soil, and it's got a tremendous amount of water holding capacity, a lot of long-term late season holding capacity that's going to be a tremendous value during pollination and air fill. However, when it's really wet, that type of soil is hard to root in, and it doesn't always root down as fast as it should. So it's something that we have to really watch with our growers, especially if they're going to be fertigating and putting fertilizer on. We want to be helping our growers with timing. Timing in this soil, this heavy soil, is really as critical as timing in the sand, okay? Because when it's too wet, it's a problem. So when we start looking at some of these blocks, we're seeing a lot of these blocks this year where it looks like we've got blocks in our data sets. And I'm going to show you some out of some sandy soil here in a little bit. But this is a heavier clay soil. We've got these blocks, and they seem to go up and they drop right back down after a period of time. It simply is a time frame of rainfall. That's all it is in this example. That soil was completely saturated. It's above saturation point when we're seeing this, or it's above field capacity. Sorry, it's at full saturation. So in this example, when we look at our individual sensors, clear back here on June 10th, and we see this rain event that took place, it rained for a pretty good period of time, which has been what's happening, right? It rains for several hours.
Yeah, several hours, and it's just night after night.
Yep, it just continuously goes. So this is an example of a long extended rain. The soil was so wet, it was completely saturated. As soon as the rain stopped, though, it dropped right back off, and we started to find field capacity at these different levels. So when you see these little blocks and growers are saying, that data doesn't look good, what am I seeing? What's going on? Well, it is so wet right now. We are saturated, and you can't get any fuller than full. And as soon as that started to drop off, look at what happened down here on the bottom. We started to show an increase in moisture content on the sensor graphs. Now, this is a combination of two things, actually. And you want to remember this when you're talking to your growers. This is not just moisture content increasing at the bottom. This is also related to soil temperature. Remember that. As you're seeing moisture content continuing to increase through these early season stages, this is also temperature increasing and the water molecules changing in size. You're going to see that on your sensors and with your probes. Let me show you the temperature graphs. See, here's your temperature graphs, and see how your temperatures are rising. Your temps are going to rise right along with your moisture content. So again, there are so many things to think about when you're seeing a moisture graph change. It may not be just moisture. It may be something else with the moisture, including your salinity. We'll talk more about salinity in a later webinar as we look at some of the lighter soil when we're fertigating. But right now you want to think about temperatures increasing, which is actually going to show moisture content, the appearance of moisture content increasing. In all reality, when we think about this extended time frame here of saturation, this soil is so wet down in the bottom profile, you couldn't hold any more water down there if you tried. It is totally, totally saturated. And we see the same thing that happened again here at late June, another situation where the same thing happened. So in this particular field, very little root activity has taken place. You'll see here about the 24th, we started to finally dry down the topsoil a little bit. We're starting to pull some roots out of that 2-inch sensor. And it's just now over the last couple of days beginning to pull some moisture out of that 6-inch sensor. So this field is finally starting to dry down a little bit, and it's finally going to get some oxygen in that profile. This profile has been so wet, there's very little oxygen, if any, in this profile, not healthy for a corn plant, as Peyton was saying earlier. So we've got a lot of things happening here that we need to share with our growers. When I'm looking at giving a recommendation on this, I'm going to give these recs every single week based on the data that we're seeing, because we are going to be looking for diseases. We're going to be looking for stress factors. As that corn plant continues to grow through this time period, we're going to be looking at root development in the same way. So when our roots are not developing down, are they developing out? Are they developing sideways? If that's the case, we're going to have issues later on. So again, all things that we can do to help our producers as we move forward. Amy, any questions up to this point?
No, I have not seen any come in yet.
Okay. Well, there's one thing I'd like to point out. I was the one who set these budget lines, and I did it this way on purpose. And I'd be curious, Amy, Morgan, if you were to look at these budget lines based on what I just shared with you, Is that full point right, or is that full point a little bit off, in your opinion? I have
Hi,
Peyton
Kelly.
with me too. Ask
Can you hear
Peyton
me?
a little. Hey, Morgan, I can hear you. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
I guess I'll put in my sense. I mean, I would, looking at this after hearing what you say, bring down that full point just a little bit. Maybe just a tad bit to where you see that water drain down through the profile and sit at the end of those blocks. I don't know if I'm explaining it right. But during that long rain, it's just, yep, right about there. Because during that long rain, it's just saturated. So I don't think that represents the true full point of the field.
Very good. Yep, that's exactly right. We want to be able to lower that full point to where we know we're not saturated. We're getting back to field capacity, right? And as wet as this soil is, I'm going to say that is spot on. But I think I'll take it a step farther, Morgan. You're exactly right. But let's step it down just a little bit farther. We really need these fields to dry down, and to encourage our producers to dry it down a little bit. So right up here, our full point would be at about the sum is at about 17.6, 17.05. I'm almost going to say let's drop it down to 16.75, which is a little bit lower, but encourage the growers to keep this field a little drier. And also watch to see the next few rain events if we're on, and see if that that saturation comes up and comes back down. See how long it takes to get to that point. So I'm gonna set this budget line just a little bit lower. You're spot on. This is getting back to field capacity right over here, and you're exactly right. If I wanted to go full field capacity, that would be the point. But I'm also going to work a little bit with the grower psychology. So I'm going to go set it at 16.75, and I'm going to set it on June 10th. So I'm going to adjust this real quick. I'm going to add a budget line back here on June 10th. And this is real easy to do. If you guys haven't been changing your budget lines, I'd highly encourage you to do that, because it will make you a better water manager, and it brings a lot more value to your grower when we're doing these things consistently. And I'm going to leave this at 14.96, which is a little bit strange. But it was basically about 86%. I just put in 86% for my refill is what I did, and I got me to 14.96. We could actually change that to 15, wouldn't be a big problem. So I'm going to change that now to 16.75 on the 10th, right? There we are. I'm going to add that, and I'm going to close this out. And
Kylan?
there, I've dropped that down a little bit. Yep, Amy?
You might explain a little bit about the refill line and how to determine that number. I've had several questions already this year about that.
You bet. You bet. So let's talk about that a little bit, because the refill point is something that is either going to help you or hinder you when you're building your business and working with your producers. In this particular example, you'll see that I set it at 86%. In most of our certification training, we teach people to drop that to 75%, right? Well, let's just put this in 16.75, and we encourage people to set that refill at 75%. Now I'm going to go back again to June 10th, and let's change that, and let's see what 75% looks like, and then I'll explain why I don't necessarily do that. Okay, so we're going to add that 75% line. Set point with the same date. Oops. Okay, well, I better change that date. Maybe I'll go to the 11th and add that. And then this will show us a drop. All right. Right up here in the early stages, right up here from the first part of June, or about June 6th to June 10th, that is set up at an 86% budget line. Okay. This budget line now on the 10th, that is set up at an 89% refill point. So this is 86% refill point. This is 89% refill point instead of the 75% refill point. And I've had several people ask Amy why I do that. Well, I'm going to be very open and honest. It's about grower trust. That's all it is. When I'm working with a grower in some of these heavier soils, when I set up a full point and a refill point at 75%, look at this. Look at this over here on the side. 16.75 shows the full point, and is the full point. The refill is all the way down at 12.56. So 16 to 12, that is 4 inches of water. And where we challenge ourselves by setting that to 4 inches is growers don't always trust it. When a grower looks at their graph and the grower looks at the sum line and it's 4 inches of water to a refill point, they don't believe it. They don't trust it. They're used to 1 inch. They're used to 2 inches of space in there, not 4 inches. Now, we as data specialists, we're certified, we're trained. We understand the why behind that. A lot of the growers don't. So when I'm working with a brand new grower, a lot of times I'm going to set this budget line so that there's only a 2-inch difference between my full point and my refill point is 2 inches. And then I explain to the grower, if you're putting on 1 inch, we're going to be about halfway down through this. I'm going to give you a recommendation. I'm going to let you know when it's time to start the pivot, but we're not going to be any more than 2 inches in depletion. Are you comfortable with that? And when the growers say, yeah, I can live with that. I got to learn to be better. I got to be better at this. I can adapt to 2 inches. Well, that's a win, right? When they have to adapt to 4 inches, that's a lot harder sell. And when you look at these budget lines, that's why I do what I do. I never set a budget line with the intention of leaving it for the season. I set it with the intention of growing a relationship with my grower and a relationship built on trust. Does that make sense, Amy?
Like,
I think we lost Amy.
I hope so.
I think she tried to jump in there. But
sorry.
so if anybody, there you are. Yep. So Amy, if you're on your Wi-Fi, I think you might have a little, might be a little behind there. But hopefully that answers your questions, and hopefully that makes sense. So if you haven't, that's a really good question, Amy. Appreciate that. When you get into your sandier soils, it's a little bit different. When you get into some of the later season, when you're going into getting ready to head towards harvest time, you're going to want to drop that line down. You're going to encourage that grower to dry that field down as much as possible before harvest. Then you're going to drop that to that 75, 65% moisture content range and really get them to draw that down if possible. But you'll never get there if you don't build the trust with the grower. So the grower trust is why I really do that. Morgan, if you can hear this, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
All right, perfect. Well, anybody that's on the call, if you've got any questions towards that, it looks like we have Nathan Scott on here. Welcome, guys. I know you guys have done this for quite a while, but if you've got questions, why by all means, raise your hands or send Amy a text or something of that nature, and we'll definitely get your questions answered. Or you guys can call me afterwards. Okay. I wanted to step in and look at a couple others. Sensors. I wanted to go in and see what a probe looked like in the sandier soil. that was excessively wet. Let me see, I think I've got it marked in here as field 66. I'm gonna find the right one here. Oh, before we go there, I'm gonna show you this one. This field here, field 69. There were some things that came up on this field, and I'm gonna be very honest, I don't have an answer to it yet. And this is actually something that the grower brought to my attention, the dealer brought to my attention, and I don't have an answer, but we're working with the agronomist, and I'm working on the data side to find an answer. And I thought it was a very good question. That was the big thing. I thought it was an amazing question, and I wanted to figure out, you know, the solution behind it. And it all deals with this time frame right here between June 17th and June 22nd. We have some things going on right here that shows an increase in moisture content. It's showing almost a static moisture content in here. Not a lot changed until the 20th, 21st. And this raised a question with the grower because we had no rainfall. We had no water, no moisture actually hitting this field. But for some reason, when we look at the individual sensor, our top sensor actually increased in moisture content. The other sensors continued to lower. And it's very, very interesting what's taken place here. And as you can see, our 6-inch sensor, it really stalled out, just like we had a rain event here on the top, right? On the surface, it looks like we had rain, but the grower continually insists that we did not get any rain on this field. Now, I am verifying the weather on that for sure, because some of these rains have been very spotty, but we're also digging in and looking at several other components, such as just the humidity for the day, the different things that were taking place as it pertains to weather. But what gets me is this flat line at the 6-inch sensors. That is telling me these upper profiles were satisfactory. They were increasing in moisture, and we did not need to pull any water here. When we come to the end of that, on the 20th, we began to stair step down in all sensors, and then it began to rain. It began to rain, and it actually rained pretty hard right here. And you want to know what's crazy? This is gonna drive some of you guys nuts. It drives me nuts until I found out the truth of the matter. This is a rain event. These two here are irrigation events. No joke. So we had this big rain event, and then this was a rain event, but then these last two spikes right here, those are irrigation events. And when I saw that, I asked, the grower said, those are irrigation events. I'm like, are you kidding me? Why? And he goes, well, that's effluent water. When it rains a lot and our pits are full and the feedlot, we have to get rid of this water. So that is literally effluent water that they're pumping onto an already full profile, trying to get water out of the pit and the feedlot. See, that's the problem with having a complete standard on everything. We can't say that there's an absolute right or wrong. These guys are cattle producers, and when those pits are full, you got to get rid of the water. So right now, they're doing the best they can. We're actually watching this deep profile water. We're looking at this deeper profile saying, okay, guys, we got to shut off that pivot. We're going to move the effluent from that pivot to a different one. And we're trying to get rid of our effluent water as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So again, this is going to change your irrigation recommendations if you're working with a feedlot, okay? So there's several things that were taking place here that would cause my recs to be different. Once we confirm with moisture content what this is and with weather, I'm not fully convinced yet that this isn't rain. And the reason being is this field is about 10 miles from the farm. It is right next to the feedlot, of course, but it's about 10 miles from where this grower lives. So I'm not fully convinced we didn't have rain here yet, okay? But we'll find that out. But that was an anomaly that's worth looking at. And then again here, when you're working with growers in effluent, you can help them manage the deep water so that you can help them put the effluent into the right fields at the right time. We're actually looking at this deep sensor here, and when we start to increase again to where we were back the 1st of June, we're going to switch fields. So that's already been discussed. So something to think about, another way that you can bring value to your producers if you're working with anyone in that environment. All right. Let's see here. You know, I'm gonna show you something else here if you want to sort through filters. Let's go down here. Let's look for all of our fields that are at full. See if we have any. There's a couple that are full. This might be actually a little easier way to sort through your graphs if you're looking for something specific. Let's dive into this one. This one's an anomaly. Again, some little bit lighter soil, but there were some things taking place here that I really wanted to point out, and it has to do with these big spikes. And we know these spikes can be a little bit annoying. You know, we get growers asking questions. What is this? What's our full point? Where, you know, what does all this mean? Well, what I really wanted to show you is what was taking place in the subsoil in this particular field, and how we explain to the grower how full is full. Now, what happened here is the grower didn't trust the data. The grower was saying, I had a huge 3-inch rain, and this thing doesn't show that. It's showing that we've got this increase, but then it just, you know, if it increased 3 inches, I should add 3 inches of water to my profile. That's what a grower was saying. And it's a brand new grower, first year experience. And he wasn't trusting the data because after each of these big rain events, it went right back towards the full point. And he's like, that is not true. There's no way it can be true. Well, what I was able to show him was saturation at the deeper levels. So I'm going to zoom this in so it looks a little bit different and identify what saturation looks like through the profile. So our rain events took place here on the 22nd. You can see 2 pretty good rain events here and another one that took place on the 23rd. So 2 days in a row we had rain. In between that we had cloudy, cooler weather, right? Just a kind of a miserable time for this time of year. And what I was able to share with this grower that really took it to another level for him is what saturated soils look like using sensor data. Now, it was important that this grower understood that sensors work like light bulbs. They either work or they don't. And that's important for all of us to remember. When a sensor is calibrated and working properly, it's no different than a light. When that switch is on or off, when that switch is on, it has X amount of brightness to it. A sensor is the same way. When it's on, when it's working, it is calibrated. It works. And we have to be able to answer the question, what is going on agronomically when the sensors work? Okay? When the sensors are on and doing their job. Well, let's look at this rain event back here on the, looks like the 9th, June 9th. We'll start here. Little rain event, completely saturated soil. Well, look at this. Now, remember, your sensors are pulling a reading every 30 minutes. That's the key here. You're pulling a reading every 30 minutes. Completely saturated soil. We show an increase in moisture content. Even though the rain event only lasted about 30 minutes to an hour, look at what took place down through the profile. Our deep subsoil was wet for actually about almost 5 hours. Our deep subsoil was completely saturated. And it was over the course of time. Each one of these little steps is longer and longer as we go deeper through the profile. All that's saying, guys, is that it was so wet down deep, it took about 5 hours to get completely past saturation to where we went back to field capacity. And what I shared with the grower, and I literally used a glass of water. Sitting on his desk was a cup, and I filled that cup full of water. And I asked the grower, can I put any more water in this cup? And he goes, no, that makes no sense. I said, well, if I started pouring water into this, it would have to go higher than the edge of the cup to run out. And he goes, yeah, absolutely. I said, the same thing is taking place here. I said, look at your soil profile. It is completely at field capacity here. As soon as it rains, it's overfull, it's saturated, it's running over, it's running out, and then it drains off. But it took several hours to do that. In this instance, we're at 4. In this instance, it took almost 10 hours for that subsoil to completely drain back to capacity. Here, we had it again at full capacity. It overfilled the cup again, oversaturated, took 10 hours to come back to field capacity. Now, the top sensors only took maybe an hour, 2 hours, but down deep with all that water draining through there took almost 10 hours. So when that grower saw that, he was just flabbergasted. He's like, that makes so much sense. He says, I've never thought about a soil profile working that way. And these are literally the eyes in the root zone for these producers. So learning how to communicate what you're seeing into a visual that the growers can see is priceless to your business. It really, really is. I simply used a glass of water to show him that example, and it worked like a charm. So today he's pretty excited about it. He's excited to start drying down the profile and moving this to another level. Amy, Morgan, we have any questions yet?
I have not seen any.
All right, perfect. Well, guys, we're about 40 minutes into this, and I know we don't have a lot in attendance today. I know we didn't get the email out until really late, so I appreciate those that did jump on. But we do want to leave a time for Q&A. So be thinking about any questions that you may have, and we can get you unmuted on our end so you can answer or ask your questions if you'd so desire. I think we'll look at one more field. I want to go back and look at one more here while people are thinking about their questions. Did I set any refilled? No, I don't think I did. I think we covered that one. Amy or Morgan, is there anything that you would like to cover in detail that I haven't covered here thus far today?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing.
Morgan, anything on here?
Nope, doing good so far.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the root zone profile here. I'm going to go back and delete this this graph or this budget line. And I'm going to close this out. I'm going to set up a root zone profile, and I'll show everybody what it looks like in the app, in the new app, in the Grow app. This is going to take some manual work this year to use the Grow app for the root zone profile. This is something that I must apologize to everyone for. I didn't realize early on, and but now that I realize it, it's not that hard to set up. And I want to show you how we would identify root mass and how I set up the root zone profile for VO Grow. Okay. In this particular field, knowing what I know about it and that heavier soil, I know that right now we're gonna have in the ballpark of about 10 inches. We're gonna have about 10-inch profile with roots, and we're hoping in the next week to 10 days we can start getting down towards 18-inch profile, assuming that we don't get any more rain. That is our goal. This crop is actually maturing quite well and a lot faster than we expected, even with the cooler temperatures. So we're hoping that we can root to 18 inches before we pollinate. But right now we only have about a 10-inch profile. So I'm going to go and set up a budget line for a 10-inch profile. And the way I do that, when I'm looking at these individual sensors, I'm actually looking at these numbers up here, and I'm going to get a rough estimate if all the soil profiles are about the same. And in this particular case, we're in that, 47, 50, we're going to be in that 47 to 50 range, 53. Yep. So we're all in that, clay loam type soil. So it's all pretty heavy. So I'm going to go set up a budget line. And I know this is a little bit different than what the guys taught earlier, but this is how I do it because I just don't spend a lot of time setting up budget lines. So I'm going to go back and set my date. I don't remember what date it was. It's like the 6th. So I'm going to go back to the 6th. My rooting depth is only about 10 inches. I'm going to leave it at that. So I'm going to set my full point. Here's what I do. I'm going to take my full point, which is at 16.75. I'm just going to use 16.75. I'm going to divide it out by 3, real simple. 5.5. I only have a third of my profile that's available. I'm going to set a 75% in this example, and I'm going to add that and see what it looks like. It might be off a little bit, but this is how we'll start getting our root zone to start showing up. So yeah, I think we're off a little bit because we know, as Morgan mentioned earlier, that's actually a little bit too full. When we're up over those big boxes, we're a little bit too full. So I'm actually going to go back and reset that right to 5 as my refill. Okay. So I'll make a quick adjustment here, and then we'll show you what it looks like in grow. 10 inches. We're going to set our full point at 5. Refill at 75. I'm good with that, since we're looking at just the 1 foot profile. There, that looks a whole lot better. And you'll also see that it matches this fairly well. If I was to go in and adjust that, it'd be about the same. So pretty happy with that. Now, when we start looking at the Grow app, you'll notice if we go in and dig a little deeper, we've got this crop model, right? And after we set up our budget line, we set up our root zone profile. Now we can see a 10-inch root zone on this plant model, and it'll start calculating our moisture contents, etc. A little bit concerned about this yet, and I think this would be a little bit better if we didn't have the inches next to the volumetric water. Maybe someday we'll have the choice to choose there, because we're going to have to explain that to the growers and what that is, but that's okay. For right now, this is for you guys to give recommendations with. I'm totally good with that the way it is. Maybe one day we'll be able to toggle it back and forth. We'll see what the developers say. But right now, I'm pretty confident with the 10-inch root zone. I can see that as we continue forward, I'll make adjustments on this plant growth model. And very soon, for sure by next year, this piece will all be automated, and it'll be taken into account the way the water's actually pulling out of the profile automatically. So that's what I wanted to show you on this real quickly. The other thing that we want to think about as we're looking at these graphs, when you're looking at this trend graph in Grow, this trend graph, this moisture trend graph is working off of the full 3-foot profile. Okay, it is on the 3-foot profile. Today, it does not allow you to use the root zone profile for this trend graph. Soon, you're going to have the option to do either or. You will toggle between which one you want to see, whether it's the root zone or the full profile. Myself personally, I've always worked with full profiles. I've never used the root zone graphs historically. Now that we have Grow, I will start using it a little bit for that purpose that I just showed you. But in the future, you'll have the choice to do either or. Okay? So it's a little bit confusing, but hopefully that makes sense. The other thing I really wanted to point out on Grow are these components here, these 2 little white lines. This is actually your full point. If you guys can see that where my mouse is, that is the full point. This is the refill point. So it's very important that this is set up in such a way that your growers trust the data, that about the time that the growers are seeing this hit the refill point, they can start the pivot. So the way I've been explaining it to the producers that I work with, and if you've heard me talk in the past about how we set up budget lines, I always set up what's called the safe refill. And that's part of the reason I don't necessarily go to 75% either, especially when I'm managing full profiles, is I want to have a safe refill point. So I share with the growers that this is a safe refill point, and when the bubbles, which is their current moisture status, when that bubble crosses that point to refill, start the pivot. That is the grower's trigger mark. So when it hits refill, start the pivot. The reason that I'm doing that, which you'll probably see next week, is we're going to have a refill option here. So there's 3 different ways to view your data: refill, optimal, or full. I want my growers to be able to wake up every single morning, confidently see any of the pivots, any of the fields that are in the refill status, and know that those are the ones we start right now. That's where we go right now. And I want to train my growers to trust that. And that's part of the reason why back here on these budget lines, I'm setting a budget line that is trustworthy, that the growers will trust. And that budget line is what that moisture trend graph is seeing right here. So I want my growers to be able to trust that bubble, to cross that white line, and when that probe shows up in the refill box right up here, they can start the pivot and know that it's a safe time to do so. That's the way I'm doing this. I see this trend graph here will be extremely important to do that very thing in the very near future, especially when you think about growers with 40, 50 pivots or more. That's an important component. So the trust is what you really want to think about as you're setting your budget lines. Okay. All right, we've had a few people jump in. I think we've more than covered a lot of things today. We've made a lot of headway. So there are some things I've got planned for next week already. We just don't have time to get it all into one webinar. But you have an idea now what we're going to talk about. We're going to be finding anomalies. We're going to be finding things that you can use to bring value to your business. And if you want to grow a business, you want to grow it substantially, call us. Let us know what you want to learn. Tayton and I just had an experience this morning. Tayton, it's a pretty cool experience, right? We had a grower who had a bad experience last year with people outside of our control, right? Mm-hmm. And the grower made a commitment to sit down with us this fall and discuss bringing water management to the whole entire farm.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And he did that because we talked about how we build trust and what we, achieving that grower's goals and objectives. So guys, these are things that we want to help you do, is be very, very profitable in water management. If you're profitable, your growers are going to be profitable, and you can continue to grow. Okay. Let's see, what other kind of questions do we have? Any questions come in, Amy? Hands raised or anything? There's also a Q&A box if anybody has questions.
I've not seen anything.
And we did a great job, is what you're saying, right? We covered everybody's questions right out of the gate.
It was fabulous.
Yeah, always room to improve, and we always want to get better. So, Amy, I would say let's be in touch with all the dealers and everybody that's out here. Oh, looks like we had a question pop in here. I'm right here. I'm gonna. Hey, Scott Budke, very good. Scott, you're the man. Appreciate it. You guys. I'm going to feed into Scott here a little bit. I got to tell you, Scott, my wife and I were in Nashville a week ago Monday, and we came back up through Illinois, Indiana. Oh man, broke my heart, buddy. You guys are facing things out there that I've never seen before, to the point where these fields, they smelled bad. We drove by fields that just smelled horrible from all that stagnant water and of course, you know, the dead animals and everything that you know is out there. So completely feel for you and the families that are in your states out there, man. Tough stuff. So in our prayers, buddy. Appreciate your feedback. All right. All right. Well, guys, this has been exciting. I'm glad to be doing these again. I'm looking forward to it. I will have some presentation content next time. You guys know me. I like to dig into the sales side and add value and you know, leadership and transformation, things like that. So a lot of this training is going to be about that. It's going to be about how you use this type of information to help a grower be profitable, to help the grower move to the next level of their precision ag business, how to make their fertilizer nutrients go further. All that stuff makes you more valuable to that grower. And I'll be very honest, you're a crop metrics dealer, you're part of this team. I want you to be the most valuable component of that grower's operation. And I believe we can do it. You're working with the biggest limiting factor, which is water. And I'll promise you, you can be the most valuable person to your growers. So that's our objective. So guys, I appreciate it. I think we'll stop the recording at this point and look forward to seeing you next week. Hope everybody can join again. Thanks for being on.